Picture this. 3 generations of American bombers, a stealth ghost that flew undetected for over 30 hours, a Cold War relic that carried more ordnance than most nations' entire air forces, and a 70-year-old Titan that has been raining destruction since before most of us were born. All converging on a single country in a single sustained coordinated campaign. This was not a warning shot. This was not a demonstration of force. This was a designated operation, and in just 38 days, it rewrote the military map of the entire Middle East. Welcome back. If you have been following our coverage of this ongoing international conflict, you know we have been tracking every phase of this operation, from the very first stealth run on February 28, 2026. Today we are giving you the full picture, the complete breakdown of how a modern military deployed 3 generations of strategic bombers in sequence. The Advanced Spirit, the Supersonic Lancer, and the Venerable Stratofortress to systematically dismantle one of the most heavily armed regimes in the modern Middle East. We are going to walk you through the strikes, the targets, the technology, the numbers, and what it all means now that a ceasefire has taken hold. This is a long one. Stay with us, because the details are staggering. And if you have not subscribed to this channel yet, do it now. This is exactly the kind of deep analysis we deliver every single week. Let us start at the very beginning, February 28, 2026, a date that will be remembered in military history for a very long time. On that day, coordinated strikes were launched across the target nation in what was officially designated a major strategic campaign. According to reporting from aviation analysts, the opening salvo was delivered by 4 advanced stealth bombers, the crown jewel of the long-range bomber fleet. These aircraft flew from their home bases in the continental United States over the Strait of Gibraltar all the way to their destination territory and back. Round trips exceeding 30 hours, supported by aerial refueling tankers precisely positioned along the route. The stealth aircraft arrived in hostile airspace without a single warning. That is the entire point of a stealth bomber. The enemy never saw them coming. And what did they carry? Senior correspondents citing an unnamed official confirmed that the 4 stealth bombers dropped dozens of 2,000-pound bombs on underground ballistic missile sites across the country. Further reporting confirmed that the targets were hardened ballistic missile facilities. Those 2,000-pound munitions were almost certainly advanced penetrator weapons attached to precision guidance kits, a weapon system that has been in active use since the early 1990s. In other words, the operation opened this modern campaign with a weapon born in the late Cold War, guided by modern precision systems delivered by the most advanced stealth aircraft ever built. That contrast tells you everything about the doctrinal approach. Now here is where it becomes brilliant. The target nation has spent decades building what it calls its missile cities. These are massive underground bunker complexes scattered beneath the soil, used both to store ballistic missiles and to launch them through dozens of tunnels and exits. They are hardened, they are buried, they are designed to survive. The stealth bombers were not trying to destroy the missile cities outright. That would require something far more powerful. What those first aircraft did was collapse tunnels, cave in entrances, and essentially seal those complexes from the inside, turning them into tombs for the missiles stored within. A precise, calculated, and devastating objective. By the end of the first 24 hours of the operation, coalition aircraft had struck over 1,000 targets all across the territory. Command and control facilities tied to the Revolutionary Guards Corps were taken out. Naval vessels and submarines were hit. Air defense systems were destroyed. And as intelligence reporting confirms, the opening strikes also targeted national leadership directly. The Supreme Leader was among the earliest casualties. His death confirmed shortly after the initial strikes, plunging the nation into a simultaneous military crisis and leadership vacuum at the worst possible moment. By March 4th, just 6 days into the operation, the impact of those stealth strikes was already measurable. Ballistic missile launches had dropped by 86% compared to the launch rate recorded on February 28th. 86% in less than a week. That is the battlefield effect of precision applied to the right targets at the right time. But the stealth aircraft were just the beginning. With air defenses already crippled, the need for invisibility became less critical. The air campaign did not need its ghost planes anymore. It was time to bring in something louder. Much louder. Enter the supersonic bomber. On March 1st and March 2nd, the military deployed these heavy payload aircraft to continue the campaign against the missile infrastructure. This airframe is older than the stealth jet. It lacks low observability. But what it has is an extraordinary capacity for destruction. The supersonic bomber can carry up to 75,000 pounds of ordnance, nearly double what the stealth bomber can carry, and it can deliver that payload at supersonic speeds. According to regional press reports, a trio of these bombers followed up on the opening stealth strikes, flying from their home base in the American heartland with aerial refueling support, heading directly into the targets that had already been softened up. Central Command confirmed the mission publicly in a March 2nd post accompanied by video footage of the bombers taking off. The post stated that these aircraft had struck deep inside enemy territory to degrade ballistic missile capabilities. The political leadership had promised to destroy the missile arsenal and raze the missile industry to the ground. These strikes were the direct execution of that promise. Among the weapons loaded onto these aircraft were long-range cruise missiles, standoff weapons that allow bombers to strike from a safe distance, and heavy earth penetrators. As engineering analysts reported, the airframe slotted perfectly into the wider network of American air power operating overhead. While fighters and strike aircraft worked to eliminate whatever remained of the air defense network, these bombers swept in, unloaded massive volumes of precision munitions, and turned back for home. The combination punch was already taking shape. Stealth bombers to collapse the missile cities, heavy bombers to destroy whatever was missed. And something else was coming, something older still. But before we go any further, a quick word on why you should be subscribed right now. Because while the mainstream news was focused on the headlines, we were here breaking down the technology, the tactics, and the strategic logic behind every single phase of this operation. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications because the next chapter of Middle East geopolitics is already being written, and we will be here to explain every word of it. Now back to the bombers. By March 2nd, the national leadership declared publicly that the enemy's air defenses were gone. Its navy was gone. Its air force was gone. Its senior leadership was gone. That was perhaps a touch more absolute than the battlefield reality at that precise moment. But it was not far from the truth. According to a detailed battlefield analysis from a prominent defense institute, by the 10th day of the campaign, coalition forces had engaged approximately 5,000 targets across the country. The military had already hit more than 50 warships. The strikes were relentless, precise, and above all, cumulative. Each wave reduced the enemy's ability to respond to the next one. Which brings us to the third and perhaps most consequential phase of the operation, the arrival of the stratofortress. This aircraft has been flying since the early 1950s. It is not stealthy. It is not fast, but it is enormous. It is reliable. And it can carry more weapons than almost any other aircraft in the world, up to 70,000 pounds of ordnance in a single sortie. According to the Air Force, this platform can deploy the widest array of weapons of any aircraft in the current inventory. And it has been upgraded repeatedly over the decades with engine adaptations expected to keep it operational through the year 2050. This bomber is not a relic. It is a living, breathing, continuously modernized instrument of air power. And from March 3rd onward, the target nation learned exactly what that meant. Central Command confirmed the deployment of these heavy strategic bombers on March 3rd, 2026. With the enemy's air defenses already shattered by the previous waves, these massive aircraft could operate over hostile territory without facing any meaningful resistance. The strategy shifted from the precise surgical strikes of the opening phase to what military analysts describe as sustained attrition. This means constant, relentless pressure. No pauses, no gaps, no room to breathe, regroup, or rebuild. The numbers tell the story with brutal clarity. By March 5th, over 2,000 targets had been struck. By March 11th, that number had risen to over 5,500. That is an average of nearly 500 additional targets per day, the direct result of the heavy bombers entering the campaign in rotation. Reports indicated that these aircraft were striking from an Allied base in the United Kingdom. At least 3 were confirmed at that base, likely flying in rotation to ensure that there was always at least one of these massive bombers overhead at any given time. Defense asset trackers confirmed this, noting that at this operational level, that amounted to at least 210,000 pounds of ordnance in continuous rotation. The Air Force maintains 58 active aircraft of this type, with 18 more in reserve. Even a modest increase to 5 or 10 aircraft in the European rotation would have multiplied that firepower exponentially. Military publications reported that command and control centers remained on the target list throughout this phase, each one knocked out, contributing directly to the decline in missile launches. The heavy bombers also struck missile production facilities, ensuring that as the enemy burned through whatever missiles it had left, it would have an extraordinarily difficult time manufacturing replacements. Here's where it gets interesting, because it was not just the oldest bombers involved. Defense media reported on March 11th that a staggering 15 American bombers were now flying strike missions from the United Kingdom base. Among those were multiple supersonic heavy bombers filmed being loaded with cruise missiles and bunker busters. Crucially, missile delivery systems were being removed from these airframes. A telling detail: when you remove standoff missile systems from a bomber and replace them with direct delivery munitions, you are signaling something very specific. You are no longer afraid of the enemy's air defenses. Complete air supremacy had been achieved and operations were being conducted accordingly. The analysis suggested that the target set was expanding to include large industrial complexes, weapons production facilities, and sites tied to the nuclear weapons program. And then came the most significant single data point of the entire campaign. The stealth bombers returned. Satellite imagery from commercial analysts showed 3 distinct and precise holes punched into the reinforced surface above a key nuclear site. Following a previous joint strike on the nuclear facilities back in June 2025, the target nation had reportedly layered concrete and massive mounds of soil over the top of this site as additional protection. A shield designed specifically to defeat the standard bunker busters used in the earlier campaign. It failed. Those 3 holes in the imagery indicated the deployment of the massive ordnance penetrator, a bomb weighing 30,000 pounds, a weapon that can penetrate deeper and detonate with more force than virtually anything else in the conventional arsenal. Only the stealth bomber has the capacity to carry and deliver this weapon. The conclusion was unavoidable. The invisible aircraft had come back, and they had brought the biggest conventional bomb in the inventory with them. As think tank analysis confirmed, the objectives of the operation had expanded significantly beyond the nuclear strikes of the previous year. The 4 stated military objectives were clear: preventing the acquisition of a nuclear weapon, destroying the missile arsenal and production sites, degrading proxy networks, and obliterating the Navy. All 4 were being pursued simultaneously. And now, looking back with the full picture in view, we can assess exactly what was achieved. On April 7, 2026, 38 days after the first stealth bomber crossed into enemy airspace, a ceasefire was agreed upon. The announcement came through mediation efforts with a neighboring state, with the Prime Minister announcing the agreement and inviting both delegations to the capital for further negotiations on April 10th. The national leader posted on social media that it was a big day for world peace. The battlefield results, as confirmed by the chairman of the Joint Chiefs at an April 8th press conference, were extraordinary. Central Command forces destroyed approximately 80% of the enemy's air defense systems, striking more than 1,500 air defense targets. More than 450 ballistic missile storage facilities were destroyed. 800 one-way attack drone storage facilities were eliminated. More than 2,000 command and control nodes were degraded or destroyed. 150 warships were sunk. More than 90% of the regular naval fleet. Every enemy submarine is at the bottom of the ocean. Before the operation, the enemy air force flew between 30 and 100 flights per day. By the ceasefire, that number was 0. The press secretary stated at the April 8th briefing that the military had achieved and exceeded its core objectives in just 38 days. The defense secretary went further, declaring at the same briefing that the enemy's navy was at the bottom of the sea, that its air force had been wiped out, that it no longer had any comprehensive air defense system, and that its missile program was functionally destroyed, launchers, production facilities, and existing stockpiles all depleted and decimated. According to the official accounting of the campaign's final results, more than 85% of the defense industrial base was destroyed, including the majority of its ballistic missiles, launcher vehicles, and long-range attack drones. The space program, which had dual military utility, suffered the destruction of 70% of its launch facilities and ground control stations. Nearly 80% of the nuclear industrial base was hit. As the general stated, it will take years to rebuild any major surface combatants, with more than 20 naval production and fabrication facilities damaged or destroyed. By the time the ceasefire was announced, coalition forces had struck more than 13,000 targets. Let that number sit for a moment. 13,000 targets in 38 days. Now, it would be dishonest to frame this as a perfectly clean victory with no complications. And at this channel, we do not do selective storytelling. So here's the full picture. The ceasefire arrived with significant uncertainty attached to it. Fact-checking confirmed that while the battlefield victories were real and significant, the strategic picture remained complex. The regime, despite losing its supreme leader and much of its senior military command, remained intact. A new leadership structure drawn from hardline factions emerged in the vacuum. As senior fellows at international peace organizations pointed out, stocks of highly enriched uranium remained under local control, raising long-term questions about whether nuclear ambitions had been truly extinguished or merely delayed. The The Strait of Hormuz, the enemy's most powerful remaining leverage, was still not fully open as of April 9th. Despite the ceasefire terms requiring its reopening, ships continued to receive warnings from local officials. Maritime security centers reported that tankers were still being told they would face destruction if they attempted transit without permission. The status of the strait remained the central point of contention heading into the peace talks. The ceasefire itself was immediately contested on multiple fronts. The target nation claimed it had forced acceptance of a 10-point framework. The coalition denied that characterization. Regional allies who did not consider certain neighboring territories to be covered by the agreement continued strikes against militia positions, prompting threats to abandon the ceasefire entirely. A European leader publicly called for the neighboring conflict to be included. The local government denounced the scale of continued strikes as a war crime, with at least 254 people killed in a single day of bombardment. The fog of war had given way to what analysts described as the fog of peace, a condition in which both sides claimed victory while asserting incompatible versions of what had been agreed. The total cost of the first 100 hours alone was estimated by expert analyses at $3.7 billion. Over 13 service members were killed during the campaign. And the shock to global energy markets driven by the Strait blockade sent oil prices surging in ways that are still reverberating through the global economy. So what does all of this mean? What is the strategic verdict? Here is what we know with certainty. The military deployed 3 generations of strategic bombers in sequence, each one performing precisely the function it was designed for. The stealth platform provided undetected penetration of defended airspace for the first precision strikes. The supersonic bomber delivered massive follow-on firepower once those defenses had been degraded. The stratofortress provided sustained continuous attrition once air supremacy was achieved. It was a textbook application of combined arms logic updated for the 21st century. No other country on Earth could have executed this kind of campaign. Not in this time frame. Not at this scale. The stealth bomber, 40 years into its operational life, proved that low observability still matters and that there is no defense in the world capable of stopping a bomber it never sees coming. The standard penetrator weapon, a munition that first flew in the Gulf War over 30 years ago, proved it still has operational relevance when paired with modern guidance systems. And the massive ordnance penetrator, the 30,000-pound behemoth that only the stealth bomber can carry, proved that when you need to crack something buried deep enough and reinforced enough to laugh at conventional bombs, there is an answer for that too. The supersonic heavy bomber, often discussed as a platform approaching the end of its relevance, showed that 75,000 pounds of precision munitions at supersonic speed is still a devastatingly effective tool when used in the right operational environment. 60% of the mission-capable fleet of this airframe was deployed to this campaign. A concentration that defense watchers noted likely exceeded the post-Cold War record for a concentrated deployment of this type in a single theater. And the oldest of the 3, the airframe that has been in continuous service for 7 decades, demonstrated once again why the Air Force plans to keep it flying until 2050. Sustained attrition requires sustained presence, and no bomber in the inventory can sustain that presence more reliably, more cheaply, and with more ordnance than the stratofortress. The broader geopolitical implications will take years to fully understand. The target nation as a conventional military power has been effectively neutralized for the near to medium term. Its proxy networks across the region have been severed from their primary weapons supplier. The Revolutionary Guards Corps, which was the institutional backbone of the regime's regional ambitions, lost its leadership, its command and control infrastructure, and the vast majority of its hardware. The nuclear program, while not fully eliminated, was struck again and further degraded. As analysis confirmed, key enrichment facilities had already been devastated in the previous year's strikes. What remained of the nuclear industrial base was hit again in this campaign. What comes next depends almost entirely on the peace talks and whether a durable diplomatic framework can be constructed on top of what is for now a deeply fragile ceasefire. The contested nature of the strategic waterway, the unresolved conflict in the neighboring state, the question of enriched uranium stockpiles, and the hardline composition of the new leadership all represent fault lines that a 2-week ceasefire cannot resolve on its own. But here is the strategic reality that no amount of spin from either side can obscure. In 38 days, the coalition, operating with the use of allied bases, reduced one of the most heavily armed regional powers in the world to military ineffectiveness. That is not a contested claim. It is the measurement of targets struck, ships sunk, aircraft grounded, and missiles silenced. This campaign will be studied in military academies for decades. Not as a perfect campaign, no campaign ever is, but as a demonstration of what sustained sequenced multi-platform aerial power can achieve when applied with strategic clarity and operational precision. 3 generations of bombers, 1 campaign, 38 days. We will of course keep you updated as the negotiations develop, as the question of the strategic waterway remains unresolved, and as the next chapter of this conflict, diplomatic or otherwise, begins to take shape. The story of what happens now to the regime, to the nuclear ambitions, and to the region around it is far from over, and we will be here to break it down for you with the same depth and clarity we have brought to every episode. If you found this breakdown valuable, share it with someone who needs the full picture, and make sure you are subscribed with notifications turned on so you do not miss a single update as this story continues to evolve. Thanks for watching.